Thank you for joining us. This is Kristin Walker of Everything EHR and your host of Mental Health News Radio. While we have guests from all over the world discussing all things mental health, one of our most popular shows are the ones where we discuss the growing epidemic of the dark triad, psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism, and the abuse those in contact with these personality disordered individuals suffer. Today, our guests include three of the leading educators on this subject. Kristin Louis de Canonville joins us from Dublin, Ireland. She's been on our show twice before, and by the time this show airs, her book, The Three Faces of Evil, should be available for purchase via Amazon.com or her website, narcissisticbehavior.net. Kristin's educational background includes her bachelor's degree in psychology and theology. She also holds diplomas in forensic psychology, criminology, and teaching, as well as her master's in medical anthropology. Michelle Mallon also joins us from Ohio. Michelle has her master's degree in social work from Ohio State University. She worked as a medical social worker at St. Anne's Hospital, primarily on the palliative care unit for 14 years, and continues to teach in the computer science and engineering department at Ohio State University. Her understanding of narcissistic abuse came after she was emotionally abused by a psychologist. She has since made it her mission to educate clinicians about this form of abuse, including at the hands of those in their own profession. Andrea Schneider also joins us. She is a licensed clinical social worker in private practice in San Dimas, California. She received her MSW from University of Michigan and her BA in psychology from UCLA. During her 20-year career, Andrea has counseled thousands of individuals and families covering a broad range of issues and challenges, developing specialties in maternal wellness, narcissistic abuse recovery, special needs parenting, and grief and loss. She is the author of many articles posted on goodtherapy.org, of which the most popular and most commented on are those pertaining to narcissistic abuse. We are working together to bring awareness of this abuse and the term Narcissistic Victim Syndrome, NVS, into the nomenclature and clinical curriculum for anyone working within the field of mental health. We have a long road ahead of us, and today's talk is merely one episode in a series we will continue to air on this all-important topic.
I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. Ooh, I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised we'd be cordial.
Well, I'm very excited that you all are on the show. Kristin, Michelle, Andrea, thank you for joining us today on Mental Health News Radio.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Kristin,
Thank you.
This is Kristin here in Dublin, so I want to say hello to everybody.
Yes. Kristin is actually joining us from Dublin, and I want to let everyone know that Miles, the therapy dog, is joining us as well. I won't ask him to bark because he looks pretty peaceful sitting here next to me, but he's here as well. So everyone heard the intro to the show, so they all know who we all are, and I wanted to start with Kristin. I would like you to talk about, I know we're not going to totally focus on your book, but I know it's such an important piece to everything that all of us are doing. Can you tell us the name of your book and when it's coming out?
Okay, the name of the book is The Three Faces of Evil, Unmasking the full spectrum of narcissistic abuse, and it comes out next week.
Wonderful.
So by the end of the month, it'll actually be on release.
Wonderful. And all of us have read it. Or Michelle, I know you edited the book, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I read it again.
Okay. And Andrea, have you read it as well?
I sure have. It's a fantastic book, and it's such a wonderful addition to the literary world in understanding narcissistic abuse. So I say congratulations to Kristin. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. That's everyone counts how many times I say absolutely. There's two now. What I love about the book is much like your writing, Andrea, and the things that I've written, that I've read that you've written, Michelle, is it breaks this down, this disorder and what should be its own classified disorder, narcissistic victim syndrome, and I know we're working on that, but it breaks it down to understandable pieces that everyone can digest and know it from a clinical perspective and also a survivor perspective. Andrea, what would you say about that?
Yes, I really enjoyed reading it. It's very readable. It's incredibly helpful for people to understand what narcissistic abuse is. And then I love how Kristin weaves in examples from her own personal life and also gives some fantastic examples and analogies. And it's very clear and understandable and readable. And I think that having that kind of information is so helpful for survivors and those that have been impacted, because you need to understand what's happened to them, first of all, and who they're dealing with,
Right.
but then also that there's hope to heal. And I just love Kristin's writing. She's just fantastic, and it's an honor to read her book.
And I
Very
know
well done.
Kristin, being the humble Irish woman that she is probably 50 shades of red right now.
Yes, it's hard to think that you're really talking about me, I have to be honest.
It's such a well-done book. Congratulations.
Yes.
It's so digestible, and, I think readers are really going to benefit from it. And just it should be required reading as well for therapists.
Absolutely.
To be able to understand what narcissistic abuse is, because there really is not much written about it in such a tangible way. So, I think it should be required reading for clinicians, but also for survivors as well. So I think it will help both audiences tremendously.
And I think, Michelle, this brings me into the work that you're doing out there. I'd love to hear about this from your perspective as well, and why you took on the journey of editing this book.
It's kind of interesting. I'm not really even sure how it happened. Kristin, do you remember? I think I read your chapter that you had out there on your website, and I do a lot of grading of ethics papers for a class that I teach, and I had been in the middle of grading. I think I had 150 students that semester writing ethics papers, and so I was already in editing mode. And I think I read your chapter, Kristin, and then I gave my feedback about how much I loved it, and I said, do you want me to tell you about any minor errors I found? And you said, yeah, sure. And that just kind of evolved into me and I love editing, so it was fun, because I got to read so much of what she was writing, and I felt like I was able to connect with her on a level that was even deeper than before. I just have so much respect for Kristin and what she's doing with her journey.
And of course, it was for me, it was a godsend. You were like an angel coming at the right moment. Really, really. Michelle is too nice, but she could tell you how I must be dyslexic, and I must be the high end of, because, I really needed her, and she did a tremendous job.
No, you're not dyslexic at all. I can't even imagine just the scale of trying to write a book, all the things that you have to think about, and then to have it be limited in what it can say, because I think there was kind of a certain page limit in there, and there's just so much experience in you that needs to come out to be able for you to pick and choose what things went into that book and what things didn't. I don't know how you did it. I'm sure that was very difficult.
It's a monumental task. And I think too, Christine, did you find that in writing the book, because I'm trying to write one as well, did you find that it was difficult going through darker periods of your life where you were in the thick of it and dredging that back up in order to write about it in a way that, you know, was readable and relatable? Was that difficult for you, or were you well past that time in your life?
I had, I think, come to terms with an awful lot by that stage of my own personal abuse. But my abuse wasn't only just by, I only talk about my brother, but I actually had other forms of abuse from other people as well that were equally quite very difficult to handle. But as I researched and went through, I was finding answers to my own questions, which was very cathartic, really. The whole process really was. The problem probably was more about I was limited to a certain amount of pages with the publisher, and so I had to, for everything I chose to put in, I had to choose what to leave out, and that was kind of difficult. But I kind of satisfied myself and sort of more or less said, right, this will be an introduction book for everybody.
Right, right.
You know, and then they can actually, certainly the professionals can then take what I mentioned, they want to know more, they can run and do their own research and come back with, and share information with me and everybody else. So that really is the way I've kind of taken the book.
Right.
But it will, if you're dealing with your own pain and it's relatively recent, you know, in the last few years, and I call that recent, then it will bring up the pain, but that's not necessarily a bad thing as long as you have good support in place.
Right. That's what I'm finding hard with my own, is it's very fresh, as you all already know my story, but it's very fresh for me, just a year of no contact. So I'm a baby in this, and I want to bring up one of the listeners shared with me, you know, it's been 6 weeks. I should be over this already. And I said, oh, my Lord, honey, give yourself 2 months for every month you knew the person. That's how long it can take to heal from this. And, you know, that helped her a lot, put that into perspective. 6 weeks, you're at the very beginning.
Yeah, but you don't know that when you're at the very beginning. When you're 6 weeks in, it seems like it's a long time. And I think there's so much healing that you can't really recognize until after you've gone further and you can look back and see how far you've come.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's 8 times now. Sorry. Okay.
And
I totally agree.
Of course, the abuse is on different levels of the self as well.
Yes.
So you might reach one immediately, but you may not reach another level for quite some time. So I think it's an ongoing process for many people.
It is, and I think you, this is Kristin, by the way, I don't want anyone to, if someone had said to me in the very beginning, oh my God, I'm going to be dealing with this for every month, or, you know, 2 months for every month I knew that person, it almost seems like, you know, I don't want any more pain. I've had enough already. That's way too monumental a task. I just want this pain to stop now. And what I say to that is, the journey is so worth it. You will have the most incredible, deep, real lifetime friendships that you have ever experienced by going through this journey. You'll have the most success in your career, the most love in your life, all of those things that you were trying to get from the narcissist who promised this to you and didn't give it on purpose. You do get that by taking this journey of becoming, you know, going from victim to survivor to what I call thriver.
I couldn't agree more.
I think you're right on, Kristin. This is Andrea. And, you know, that process of healing, it's like there's some silver linings in the dark cloud, and there's so much life wisdom that survivors and thrivers obtain. And I think, Kristine's book is fantastic in that it helps survivors understand what's happened to them, and that really jumpstarts their healing. It really jumpstarts their healing in terms of understanding, and a fantastic primer to wrap your head around what's occurred, and that information is empowerment. So Kristine's book is just a wonderful contribution for people in the healing process, and I'm just really excited that it's out there now, and I think it's going to help so many people.
And if I could add to that, this is Michelle. I have seen on my own, like on my Facebook forum, a lot of survivors who say, it's been a year, it's been 5 years, it's been 10 years that I've been out of this relationship and I'm still healing. And when I ask, a few more questions about how far into that process did they learn what narcissistic abuse was, that's been more recently than the last time they've had contact with the person who harmed them. I think sometimes survivors look at the length of time that it's been since they've had contact with their abuser as being all of that being healing time, but really until you've gotten those pieces, that information, those pieces of the puzzle to put together to help make sense of what happened, that's not healing time. That's just time that you've kind of been spinning your wheels trying to make sense out of things. And so I think for many survivors, helping them to understand exactly at what point their pain and agony after the abuse became kind of a healing journey is different.
Thank you, Michelle. You are so right on, because I'm counting the moment that I knew what narcissism was right along, and that happened just about a month after I went officially, what I consider no contact. I had been on a journey long before then and been to many therapists and many spiritual, quote unquote, I'll put quotes around that because it was actually damaging to me. I went to many therapists that had no clue what they were doing, actually forced me into retreat in healing, because they just did everything wrong that you could possibly say to someone going through this. And it wasn't until I read Andrea's articles on Good Therapy. Is it goodtherapy.org, Andrea?
Yes,
Okay.
It is.
So I read Andrea's articles on goodtherapy.org and went, oh my gosh, I just learned Chinese in 5 minutes. This is unreal.
That's how so many survivors finally learn what this is. So many people stumble on something, they're searching for answers, they just know that what they've been through isn't the normal breakup, it's not the normal kind of end to a relationship, and they're searching and searching. And I mean, if you look at the comments under a lot of Andrea's articles, you'll see so many of the same things being written by people there. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this sounds exactly like what I've been through. For so many, it's a matter of stumbling across the right information, and that's where the healing starts to begin.
Right.
Well, Kristine here, I'd like to come in on this one because I think you're all fantastic. It took me 60 years to discover the term narcissist. I'm not joking, that's the truth. And I have been a therapist for quite a few years, and even there I never learned it. And through all of my own, as a therapist training, you have to do your own journey. Never, ever was it mentioned, and certainly not psychopathic abuse was ever mentioned. So everybody, the consciousness is raising. This is the most astounding thing for me, how now people are actually contacting me. I get many, many emails, as you can imagine, and people are actually contacting me and saying, I am the victim of narcissistic abuse, where generally speaking, I don't think people would come into the therapy room and say, I think I'm a victim of narcissistic abuse. I never heard it in all the years and I worked in a psychiatric hospital. I never heard those terms being used. So I think we're really at a time of heightened consciousness. I think the timing is now right for this as a subject. And of course it needs to be the right time. We're in an epidemic.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct. There's a pandemic. It's been going on for a long time, and I'll give you an example. There's a writer out there that's got a really large following on Facebook, and she's now been posting on LinkedIn. And there was a PhD that came on and made some comments about how we need to, he pulled in some articles about how, some people are being unfairly labeled as narcissist, and it's just got to stop. And my reaction to that was so visceral. I immediately wrote, okay, you may be right about that. However, just like in the early 80s when child abuse was not okay to talk about yet, childhood sexual abuse, I started talking about it just before it became okay to talk about it, and then all of a sudden everybody could talk about it. It was out of the closet, and there was awareness everywhere. That's where we're at with narcissistic abuse. It's just now okay to talk about it. So I said to him, please wait and post these articles in a year or two. Don't do it now, because you're doing a disservice to what this movement that's going on. Don't start putting this down quite yet. We'll get to that later, because of course there's some truth to that, but and it's usually a narcissist who's saying that someone else is a narcissist, as we all know. But anyway, I felt like, ooh, don't try to stop this express train quite yet.
Well, and this is Michelle here, but you think about if even though there may be some false positives, people saying that someone was a narcissist and they're not. Even though that can happen, that's not a reason for us not to talk about it. It's not a reason for us to cut down the communication and stop it.
Absolutely. This is Andrea. I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think we just need to get the word out, and I think it's great that people like Michelle are writing about it also in her Facebook link there, and advocating so arduously for more awareness for clinicians to really be trained in this area. So I think it's a force to be reckoned with, this grassroots approach.
Yes.
That the word is getting out, and whether it's online or whether it's in Kristin's book, I think it's so important that the word continues to get out, that the definition of what narcissistic abuse is disseminated and distributed, so people know what's happened, and then they can be linked with qualified people that can help them as well.
Andrea, I was just wondering, when Kristin was talking about how this was not, narcissistic abuse was not something that she had learned about in her own professional training. It wasn't anything that was talked about in my professional training either. My master's in social work. How about you?
Likewise. I had never heard of it, actually. It was long after I had graduated from graduate school, and actually started to notice that some of my clients in private practice were coming in with symptoms of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, complex post-traumatic stress, and uncovering some of the circumstances that maybe fueled that. And a lot of the common thread was having some toxic relationships with narcissists, or psychopaths for that matter. And so that was unearthed in what I found in my own practice, but then I see it all over the place. I'm in LA, the hotbed of narcissism out here, and you see it in Hollywood, you see it with the superficiality of Hollywood, but then you also see it in the workplace, different work settings, and I'm sure obviously Kristin speaks to this, narcissism in the workplace. You see it in families, and you see it in love relationships, in all domains. So it's unfortunately quite pandemic. But absolutely, I did not know anything about it in grad school, and so I think it is something that needs to be brought into the curriculum of teaching clinicians, so that we all can help people.
Before coming on, I went to look at my Google Analytics to see how many different countries had contacted me. And 199 different countries people have contacted me from. Now, I don't know how many countries are in the world, but
I'm Googling it right now.
Right. But when I looked at the map, because the Google Analytic map, you can see it, there was hardly any spaces that people hadn't contacted me.
Right.
Now, I say that from the point of view, not about my site, but from how widespread this is. It's in it's everywhere.
Okay, so let me just point this out. I just Googled how many countries are in the world. So official countries. Guess, I won't even make you guess. There are officially 196 countries in the world. So that means, Christine, that your site has touched every single country on Earth.
Well, I know that there's a few places it hasn't. So there must be, with the changing of everything, countries that were never countries are given names now. So there may be more, but 199. So maybe say there's 210 countries in the world. It still shows you how widespread this is.
And I'll say this, just, I started this radio show because I just love to hear myself talk. No, I'm kidding. That is kind of true, actually. But I wanted to talk about all things mental health, and then it just took on a life of its own. And we have other guests, too, that come on the show, CEOs of companies and, all these interesting things, all related to mental health, the thing that I love. And the shows that get thousands upon thousands upon thousands of downloads every single week are all the shows that we do on narcissism. So I'm that I already knew that it was a popular topic, but after that first show with Kristin, and every week I would look at the numbers and realize, and I started getting my own flood of emails coming in about the show. It just became a life of its own, and I'm certainly not going to stop talking about it, and I know none of you are either.
Well, I wonder, and this is Michelle talking here, I wonder if you've noticed, if you look at Andrea's articles on Good Therapy, she has hundreds of comments posted after her articles, and I went one day, and you can kind of get the analytics of the other articles on Good Therapy there, and just look at the numbers of comments that get posted after those articles, and I mean, we're talking maybe 10 at the most. I think there might have been one that was 20 or 25 comments. These are all the other categories of articles, and here Andrea's, and poor Andrea, she can't keep up with all of the comments. I think there have even been a few people comment there that they felt like she wasn't responding back to them quickly enough, and that's got to be heartbreaking, because in that fact, she's set up to fail. There are just so many comments just there on one of her articles. I mean, several hundred. And I think she has, is it 6 articles now on narcissistic abuse, Andrea?
You know what? I've lost track. I think it's approaching 8 or so, and there's more. But and I'm so appreciative to Michelle as well. She's been so helpful in helping me to respond to all these comments, and and it really just shows that there's such a need out there. And she also has a fantastic survivor forum that she's moderating and on Facebook, and truly an advocate. So I'm so appreciative of the 3 of you and with everything that you're doing, and whether it's writing or advocacy or blogging or whatever it may be, the 3 of you are just amazing. So it's just such an honor to hear your voices too.
But that shows the need. I mean, when I looked at the number of responses that Andrea was getting just on her articles about narcissistic abuse, that said so much. And if you look at the content of those messages and the desperation, many of the messages of, I can't find someone to help me, I know what this is now, but I can't find anyone to help guide me through the healing process. It's really heartbreaking to see how widespread it is, and yet so difficult for people to get help.
And I want to say this: we all get emails, tons of emails. I know, Kristin, you were saying you were trying to answer them before we even did the show today, and I'm starting to get them. Well, I've been getting them, but now they're even more and more and more. So, hello@everythingehr.com. Everyone can email that, and everyone else is going to give their emails at the end of the show as well. But I promise you, if anyone emails that, I'll get you to the right person. Someone emailed me and said, well, I needed a therapist in New York City. I work with nothing but behavioral health providers now all over the world. Someone needed a therapist in Italy. I sent them to Dr. Paolo Molino, who I'd interviewed on the show. I mean, I can email Kristin, where in Ireland or in England or wherever, Andrea, please help me. I need someone in LA. Michelle, I need someone in Ohio. So we have this network now of an all points bulletin that goes out to find you someone, a therapist that knows this language, because if they don't know this language, I don't know how it's going to take longer for them to be able to help you, in my opinion. And I also believe that some of the sites that are out there with people that aren't clinicians, I won't name them, I will at some point because that's just how I do things, but that are not helpful, that are not helping people. They are victim-shaming websites guised as we are here to empower you, and they do nothing but put you back to square one in many ways because they tell you that there's something wrong with you, the victim, that you were targeted, and that is BS. I'm here to say that right now, Michelle and Andrea and Kristin. I know you'll have your own thoughts on that.
Yeah, the sad thing is, for many people, these are the only sites out there where some survivors know to get help. And so if you don't know, if you're not able to find a mental health professional who is experienced with healing with this kind of abuse, and all you can find is a website that has someone who speaks some of the things that you need for healing, and then some of the other things that they say aren't accurate, you don't know that as a survivor. You don't realize you're being misled. And so until this becomes something that's recognized by the mental health profession, you're going to continue to see gurus, people popping up who may or may not know what they're doing, trying to lead other people out of this hellish nightmare.
Right. I agree with you, Michelle. And this is Andrea. I've seen some harm absolutely happen where people who claim to know clinically what's going on with a survivor actually cause more harm than good, just as Kristin mentioned, with victim shaming and blaming. And I think it's critical for survivors to have a trained clinician who understands psychologically what's going on with their client, whether they're doing telehealth on the phone in their state, or whether it becomes a life coaching relationship.
Right.
You really need to have clinical training to really understand it and to know how to guide people. And in some circumstances, and in many circumstances, survivors need an in-person therapist to really work with them through the complex post-traumatic stress. And that can be treated through EMDR, that can be treated through other trauma-informed sort of interventions, but to put on or hang out a shingle and claim to know how to manage that without the training can cause harm, and I've seen that happen with a lot of folks.
I also, Kristin here, one of the things that has worried me really, the book that I've written is actually all about the perpetrator, but I do intend writing very quickly the follow-up, which will be around the victim and what happens to the victim with this kind of abuse. But what does concern me is therapists do not understand narcissistic victim syndrome. Mm-hmm. They don't know the signs and the cluster of symptoms that emerge when you're working with someone, so they don't know what to look for. And unfortunately, and I don't think for one moment it's badness on anybody's part, right, but unfortunately, victims are being misdiagnosed by health professionals, and they're being diagnosed with having borderline personality disorder. Mm-hmm. And that's a travesty, because I have seen the fallout of that happening. I know of 2 people that were diagnosed personally, and they actually lost their children to the narcissist partner. Oh my God! And so I know of those personally. So how many is it happening to? And I'm not quite sure what the cause of that is. Partly because therapists don't know what to look for when they're looking at narcissistic victim syndrome, and because they don't really, it's not an accepted term anyway, but also they don't seem to be able to really differentiate between complex post-traumatic stress,
Mm-hmm.
borderline personality, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think that is where the problem actually lies.
I agree. This is Michelle. I agree.
Okay, thank you.
And Andrea, too. I agree.
And as a non-clinician, the only one here that's a non-clinician, but someone with a big mouth, that could end up doing a show with 3 highly skilled clinicians. I would say, luckily I've had the experience of being in and out of therapy. I've been a great consumer since I was about 12 for various reasons that I've shared on the show. I have no problem, talking about all my trials and tribulations in life, but it's not a dialogue I've ever heard until I was in my 40s. And it was certainly after I brought it up because of reading Andrea's articles. And then the psychiatrist that I work with went, oh, yeah, that is a problem. And I thought, well, why the hell didn't you tell me that when I first met you? So we could have saved so much time. I'm a Googler. I would have Googled it 7 months ago, and it's that much further along. But it's I see that, and it's a slippery slope in terms of it's no way my place ever to diagnose anyone ever. I'm not a clinician, like I said, and yet I work in the business world, and I go in and out of behavioral health organizations constantly, and I go in and out of businesses constantly. And so my experience comes largely from the workplace and watching people being sabotaged and abused and bullied and harassed at work, and watching what happens. And I can see where these diagnoses come from someone who's a clinician that doesn't know what NVS is, narcissistic victim syndrome, saying, because by the time you see someone come to sit in your chair, I'm thinking of me. I was paranoid. I was depressed. I had suicidal thoughts. I thought that I was the narcissist, and I definitely want to get into that. I think this is a good bridge into that topic that we've all been emailing about back and forth this week. Just so everyone knows, the 4 of us have this constant loop of emails back and forth. We'll riff off of something, and shouldn't we do it? We are constantly studying this, and while being good empowerers by saying, okay, Kristin, you're going down a rabbit hole. I know no one has said that, but I know when I'm doing it, maybe you should take a break from reading about this stuff for a bit. We all do that for each other. But just from a diagnostic standpoint, when someone shows up and they're in the throes of it, they absolutely believe, especially if you're highly empathic, and they've been told to believe that they're the abuser.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if we can go, Kristin, Michelle, Andrea, can we talk about that phenomenon of the victim showing up believing that they are actually the abuser and how that happens?
Sure.
Okay, Kristin here. I have to say, most people don't come into me saying that. Most people don't come into me saying, I am the victim of a narcissist. They come in because their life is not actually working at some level. And as the story unfolds, because I would be very aware of the behaviors of a narcissist, of the dark triad, which is the full spectrum, I would be just hanging things up in my little head or making mental notes. And as the story unfolds, you're left with no doubt what you're dealing with. If you are, you may not be dealing with it, but you will know that you are, because there'll be so many symptoms brought up. But there sometimes does come a time when, during the work, where the victim will voice that maybe it's them, maybe it's all them. Maybe they're the narcissist after all. Mm-hmm. Because by this time, because a big part, I think, if you're going to be working with these clients, I think it's really vitally important that you understand, because education is part of the recovery. Without the education, you won't get a full recovery. No matter how much great work you do, you won't give them everything unless they can actually see what's happened to them, how it's happened to them, why it's happened to them, and give them back their power that actually they have maybe been doing some things themselves that has helped to attract this to them. And I certainly would hold my hands up that that's how I was victimized 4 times, because I was far too passive, far too pleasing. All of the defenses that I had learned through growing up with a psychopathic brother, I carried out into the world. I didn't even know that I had developed these defense mechanisms. And where they had worked and literally kept me alive, literally, I mean that, I had no idea that I actually was operating out of them. So when I'm working with people, I actually also, and I love the defense mechanisms. I hail them.
God, they save you. They save you from death, literal death, yes.
But there also comes a time where you have to look at those defenses and see, are they serving the individual now? And does that individual as an adult really need them now at this stage of their life? And that's where they can bring around the changes. Like one of the big things in me was, I'm a giver, not a taker. And I might even have seen that there was good in that, actually. But, of course, the narcissist is the opposite. They're the taker and not the giver. So between us, we made 2 sides of a coin, basically. So I had to learn how to, it sounds like a silly thing, but I had to learn how to give a little and wait to receive a little bit back. It sounds ridiculous, but I found that quite difficult because my instinct was to just give. And so to balance all of that up, I had to learn to receive as well. And of course, give the other person the gift of the joy of giving to me, which I was robbing them of that joy, which I didn't realize. But so that there's, unless you understand the behaviors of the dark triad, you're not going to be able to educate the client in front of you that they take back their power, that they honor their defense mechanisms, but they can also choose which ones they want to keep and which ones they want to change, because this is the real area of healing as far as I'm concerned.
Wonderful.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Michelle, do you want to add to that or your own bend on that?
Sure. I kind of think back to how I looked after the worst bout of narcissistic abuse that I had gone through, and I think about how utterly confused I was. I really couldn't even identify what it was I had been through to even be able to explain it to someone else, because there were so many different pieces of it that just made absolutely no sense. And I realize as survivors reach out to me, they're usually reaching out kind of from that same place, being utterly confused about what they've been through, and oftentimes they want to believe that maybe the fault lies with them. Maybe there's something more that they could do that could fix this relationship, and I don't know how much of that is because of maybe their own personal desire to be, just like Kristin was saying, the kind of person who's a giver. It seems to me that a lot of survivors I've talked with, they're also givers. They're also people who are very willing to give everything they have to a relationship. They're open, honest. They're just really down deep, really good people. And I don't know how much of that, that giving is from the kind of person that they are. I just don't know for sure, but it seems to me that in the aftermath of narcissistic abuse, it's almost like you're dealing with someone who has lost their identity. They really don't know who they are anymore. And I have had people reach out to me and say, I think I might be the narcissist. And they've been told that too. Oftentimes the survivors have been told by the person who's harming them that they're the narcissist. And so there's a lot of confusion, I think, with survivors, and even figuring out what part of what happened to them is their responsibility and what part isn't. And I really Christine, I think, hit the nail on the head with understanding that dark triad. Until you understand that there are people in the world who lack empathy, they lack the ability to feel things, they lack any remorse, they don't really have a conscience. Until you understand that there are people who are like that, you're going to continue to spin your wheels thinking, what did I do to kind of make this relationship fall apart, when it turns out there's a whole lot more to what happened to you that you haven't even begun to understand yet. And that's why her book, I think, is going to be so important to so many people.
And I just want to add before we go to Andrea that these are not movie characters like Christian Bale in American Psychopath, and we're talking about everyday people, the small business owner in the small town that lives behind a white picket fence, the neighbor, the postal worker, the person that you sit next to at work, your mother, your brother, these are your everyday psychopath, their everyday personality disordered person. So I just had to point that out. We tend to shove it into this, we don't want to talk about that because they're a knife-wielding freak that's going to come stab you. No. They're not a knife-wielding freak many times. They're a
lot less spectacular than that.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's ordinary people.
Yep, exactly.
Including your best friend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
True.
Andrea, your thoughts?
Oh, I just think you have such right-on targeted things to say. It just makes complete sense. And you're absolutely right, all of you. People need to have that education to understand what they've been dealing with. And Christine lays it out absolutely clearly in her book about the dark triad and how narcissism is at the core, but then it's on a continuum. At the far end, you're dealing with potentially a psychopath. And yet, as you said, it's not like you're going to know, obviously, that this person has these qualities. There's this facade, and there's this ability to infiltrate public life and look, quote-unquote, normal on the outside, but underneath is a very dangerous person. So it's, you can just encounter these folks at work, in your home life, in your love relationships, and it's hard to fathom that people like this exist, but they do. And unless you've had that experience, it's really hard to fathom that. But to go back to the original question, when clients come to me with these particular concerns, oftentimes they don't know that they have encountered a narcissist or a psychopath, and maybe they're presenting with depression, anxiety, PTSD symptoms, but after further digging and excavating the issues, we find that there is the common thread of narcissistic abuse. There's a toxic relationship in there, whether it's with a parent, a lover, a psychopathic boss, and it's amazing how common this is. So a lot of people present with what we call cognitive dissonance, and they're confused because the client has received so many projections and shame and blame dumping from their perpetrator that they are the narcissist, or that they're the one that's quote-unquote crazy. And so they've absorbed this over time, and they think that they're the one that is the problem. They've been abused emotionally, and then sometimes, some cases physically, sexually, but oftentimes it's very covert emotional abuse where they absorb the projections of the narcissist, and they believe that they're the one that is the crazy one. And a lot of the recovery is dismantling that cognitive dissonance and trying to synthesize what really is the reality of the situation. And it's very challenging. It's quite a journey for most survivors, and yet it's very possible.
Yes.
And alongside Christine here, alongside with the cognitive dissonance, a big one would be the gaslighting, letting them let them fully understand how the gaslighting is actually affecting them, how it is causing them to be confused and to doubt their own memories, to doubt their intuition. Not to be able to trust your own self is the worst thing in the world. And that is a big piece of the work that a therapist needs. So the therapist needs to understand the gaslighting behavior in the first place. Otherwise, how will you pick up on it as the person talks?
And that where this comes from, this is Kristin, is that this person enjoys gaslighting. They are taking sick pleasure in tormenting another person emotionally. That's
and this, Michelle here, if you think about, most of us who are survivors, we wouldn't ever treat another person like that. That's not really within.
Not knowingly, right?
Yeah, we would. In fact, just the thought that we might accidentally harm someone brings us a lot of, upset feelings. We would want to immediately try to fix that. And so we don't. I don't think until we actually come and learn about all of these definitions of gaslighting and the kinds of people who do this, we really don't believe there are people in the world who are like that. And so I think until someone shows us and tells us, look, there are people like this, I think we will continue to kind of wander trying to make sense out of something without really the full ability to make sense out of it.
Yes, the walking wounded.
And Kristin here, just to add to that, because they're great points you're making, that as a therapist, as the story unfolds and you become to recognize the gaslighting behavior, and your client won't know it at the time, you actually will be getting at that point an idea that you're dealing now with a malignant narcissist, because this is when this is the Machiavellian behavior of the malignant narcissist at work, and this is the gaslighting comes into play when the devaluing stage begins. Prior to that, it's not there. Prior to that, you're with your soulmate. Nothing is wrong. It's a dream world with someone that you're totally comfortable with. But at some point, the gaslighting comes in, and now you can be sure that actually you are, that's when the devaluing has begun.
Right.
And that can go on over a long period of time. It doesn't mean it'll start and end in a couple of weeks. It can go on for years.
Right.
But they take pleasure out of it. There is pleasure. It's sadistic. And with the malignant narcissist, you are getting this sadistic, antisocial behavior that is not there in the common garden narcissist.
Right. And again, when we say antisocial, that people think of, survivors think of, this is someone that doesn't have any friends, they're a loner, you can tell because they're antisocial. That's not true. This is someone that can look like they are Richie Cunningham walking the streets, the most innocent little lamb, with tons of friends and wonderful family life and so on and so on. And they're actually someone that takes quite distinct pleasure in emotionally torturing other people. And believe me, when you sit in front of one of these people and you know what you're looking at and you watch that smile that comes across their face when they are admitting they're letting the mask down and they're giving you a glimpse into who they really are, it's frightening. It's frightening.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to add something to what Christine said. If you think about that phase of where the idealization phase, where the abusers kind of put you on a pedestal and they feel like your soulmate, and they're doing all the right things to kind of lure you in. That kind of predatory behavior. I think for most survivors, we also don't really believe that there are people who would put that level of deceit into getting someone to trust you and to appear that you are a wonderful, caring person, and then to later learn that there are people who spend a significant amount of time really preying on other people in this way. And I think for survivors, another aspect of this is just when the abusive, the devaluation stage starts, I think we kind of get stuck thinking that the good person we saw is the real person that's in there, and we want very much to try to bring that person back, not realizing that person never existed to begin with. That was all part of that predatory stage. And until we start to realize there are people like this, healing can't begin.
Right.
But it's even a little bit more sinister, because you'll get the gaslighting behavior come in, but in between you'll get the person acting like they were in the first stages as well. So it's not that it's all good in the idealization stage, and then you go into the devaluation stage, and then it's all bad. It isn't. You'll still get that intermittent good and bad behaviors coming in. And that's what creates the Stockholm Syndrome or the trauma bonding. It is the fact that there is this intermittent good and bad behavior that actually is so confusing and creates the bond of the narcissistic captor. So again, therapists have got to understand all of that. So the gaslighting will cut you to shreds, but in between they're telling you how wonderful you are and you're the best ever. And so, it's insidious behavior. It really is.
I think that's right on.
And I would hope that, like, who is my book for? My book really, how it actually got written was quite accidentally. I had several people writing to me saying they were researching, they gathered they had been in a narcissistic relationship, but they were reading lots of research, and some people spoke about the narcissist, some spoke of the malignant, and some spoke of the psychopath. So how would they know which one were they with?
Mm-hmm.
So I tried, it didn't occur to me that this was going to trigger me to write a book, not at all. I actually went in search of a book that actually was already written that would explain all of this to me as well as everybody else. But I couldn't find one. And so basically that's how this book really was born. I decided, let's just write it simply and easily as I can. Not so simply that therapists will not want to read it either. I tried to pitch it that everybody could read it, but that we could see this movement from one stage to the other stage. And I was also interested myself to know what was the difference. Even I didn't know that at that time either. So I hope that this book really will be picked up by people who have experienced this kind of abuse, because I hope that they will get some answers that maybe they haven't had before, and can maybe then bring that into the therapy room if that's where they are. I would hope that therapists would read it so they can get a good primer to this subject, and they can take their research much, much further, of course. But I hope actually it's for other people too, because it is increasing. We all need to know it. And I would love people to understand that when you do meet somebody who's really, really nice to you, it could be that they just are your soulmate, that they just could be your best friend.
Right.
But if you're aware of this title and what it means, you will be able to notice in that idealization stage if you're getting any alarm bells go off. Watch how they treat other people.
Mm-hmm.
They take you to a lovely restaurant, but they're actually quite rude to the waiter. And the reason they do that is that they look in their world as only inferior and superior people.
Right.
They've no time for the inferior people. So they treat them badly. But you can witness that. You don't have to be that person experiencing. But you can actually get warning signs along the way that is beginning, their little mask is slipping.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's too many little red flags going up, before you do get hooked, it might be time to end the relationship and move on, knowing, well, that was nice as long as it lasted, and you just get out and don't become hooked.
Oh, and thank God for Christine. I'll say this: everyone loves personal stories. So I was in one last year. I got right out of one and then went right into another one. I've talked about that on other shows, and it was a business relationship, and I had 18,000 red flags that I did not listen to, but I had this language. And Andrea actually emailed me and said, you might want to be careful, because a lot of times people get out of the big one where that kind of brings you to your knees, and they end up right, in another one. So I did that. And then I emailed Christine and said, here are the things that are going on. And she, within 3 seconds, replied and said, malignant, narcissist, get out now. And I went, okay, how can I do this? And I followed the Gray Rock method, which I have posted on my site, and I did all the things. I have got no money, my credit's bad, I'm a horrible business owner, no one would want to do business with me, and blah, 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 and was able to get out of that, very easily. But I had warrior women on my side at that point, and a lot of people don't, are still in a place where they don't have those kind of relationships. So thank you, Kristin and Andrea and Michelle, because you've been such a part of my healing journey.
Oh, it's an honor. And this is Andrea. And Kristin, you have a PhD in life wisdom. You absolutely do. And you're so eloquent, and I'm just thrilled to be able to be connected with you three women and learning. I think we teach what we need to learn.
Right.
And wisdom is so powerful. It's just such an honor to be connected with you.
Well, this is Michelle here, and I can definitely say that I have yet to find anyone who really fully understands everything that there is about narcissistic abuse, and I'm learning every single day, and from each and every one of you, you've taught me a lot, and I'm sure that's going to continue. I'm very grateful for it.
Likewise.
And I would like to say, I would not have done all I've done without you three ladies. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Michelle, thank you so much for your patience and your kindness and your knowledge to actually, put the book that was dressed well enough to go out there in the world.
It was an honor and a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. To Andrea, your knowledge is greater than mine. You are much more academic than me. I can tell from your fantastic writings. And so I have a lot to learn from you. And Kristin, without you, this would not be getting aired. So you're no small-time person in all of this. You're, none of us are small-time in any of this, but together we bring the gifts and the talents as best we can and share them with everybody else. So to all of you, my three musketeers, I love you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Feeling so mutual.
So now we're at the top of the hour, and we're going to do this as often as we all can from our four corners of the world. But I want to make sure that our listeners know how to find what they need to find in order to read, educate themselves, and know what you do. So, Kristin, will you start with sharing how people can find out about you and your work?
Yes. Okay, well, you can find me on narcissisticbehavior.net. And on my website, if you haven't already downloaded my free chapter of my book, it would be very helpful to me if you would go into the site if you want it, and sign, because you have to sign in, leave me your name and your email address, and you'll get the free chapter immediately. But the better thing is you're on a list then, so I'm able to then send out and tell you exactly when the book will be released. It will be next week, but today I don't know quite. The physical book will be on Amazon.
Wonderful.
So you'll be able to come through my website, and there'll be a link that will take you directly to Amazon to download the book. I will also have the ebook available, and that will be through my website. But for anybody on the list, because you have trusted me and you have, those people who have downloaded my chapter, who showed an interest in knowing more, I will be offering you 20% discount off the ebook. But it'll only be for the people who have signed up.
Wonderful.
So that's my little gift back to everybody who has signed up.
The big gift.
And it's been huge. So it's been a huge response, and so thank you all very much for that vote of confidence in me. And I want to give you back a little bit of a gift to you. So is that all I think that's all I need to say.
Wonderful. Michelle?
I guess the easiest way to find me would be on the Facebook forum that I set up. It was about a year ago I set it up, and it's Narcissistic Victim Syndrome, Hope for Victims and Survivors. And I try to keep a lot of up-to-date information. It's really just a forum I created to make, one place where I can try and connect survivors to as much accurate information as possible. So I frequently have postings from Andrea, from Kristin, I've got some articles there from Jane McGregor. I've got a link on that site that has mental health professionals who we have found who are experienced with helping survivors of narcissistic abuse. And I've got, my guess is maybe 24 people on there right now. I've got it broken down by country and then by state. And I have spoken with and or checked the license status of every person that is on that list. I'm scared to death I'm gonna put somebody on there who is not really who they say they are. And even though I've been able to talk with these people and check their licenses, it doesn't mean that there can't be, a predatory person in there. But there's only so much I can do to check that. But at least it's a start. I mean, like Tanya Cusack from Australia, she's a person I think all four of us have kind of touched base with, and she's got a lot of great stuff going on too. But there are a lot of people on that list, so that's a great link to look at if you're trying to find a mental health professional. Carol McBride's on there. She's also got a lot of great information. So anyhow, that's my spiel.
And Andrea.
Hi, yes. The best way to contact me would probably be through my website, which is my name, Andrea Schneider, and then my credential, lcsw.com. And I'm writing articles for goodtherapy.org. So I have a profile through Good Therapy, which has a listing of the articles I've written. With time, though, I will be blogging more off of my own website. So that's probably the best way to contact me. And there's a way you can connect with me via email through the website, AndreaSchneiderLCSW.com. Thank you.
Thank you all, and this is Kristin Walker, and I want to let all of our providers, since most of our audience are providers, slowly being eclipsed by survivors now too, and then of course business owners in the mental health field and volunteers. You can always go to everythingehr.com, or you can go to mentalhealthnewsradio.com, and that will list all of the shows that we do. I also have some articles, and there will be an article about this show that lists the therapists there as well. And part of my job, since my bend is from the business world, is to make sure that mental health providers are using software that was created by an actual clinician and a degreed software engineer, and that their entire mission is to make mental health treatment easier as a provider so that patients are provided with better care. And in order to do that, we must do, like we are saying to do with therapists, make sure that these people have credentials, make sure that who you're dealing with in every aspect of your life, including your business, have the credentials to back them up. And also, just because someone has a credential doesn't mean you aren't dealing with someone from the dark triad. But like we've said on the show, watch for the signs, and we'll continue to do more shows about this. But again, thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you all. Lovely to speak with you all again.
I know, no one likes commercials, but seriously, folks, without the help from these organizations, we could not stay on the air. Please give a shout out to zencharts.com. If you're a mental health or addiction treatment center, you'll want to use their EHR. It's gorgeous, and they're just good people. And also MyGenetics, MyGenetx.com, because knowing your genetic code empowers your mental health treatment. And lastly, CopeNotes.com. We love getting positive messages right to our phones every day from Johnny Crowder. He's the lead singer of Prison, a heavy metal band sharing their music about suicide prevention, addiction recovery, and mental health. See, that was painless. Support them as they support us. Back to the show.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it.
Good boy.